Well, hey, welcome to the Sun City Leadership Podcast. Here we are recording mid-May, getting ready to record part 2 of our series called Creating and Contributing to Culture.
Yes.
Last month, we talked about what are the team cultures that we have and what do they look like. We walked through what does it look like to love God and what does it look like to love people and love the house and pursue excellence and choose joy, and had some great conversations around those. I'm glad to be back in the podcast studio with you, continuing this conversation. And anything that you want to tell us about what's going on here in mid-May?
The sun is finally out
Let's
in
go.
Spokane. It took so long. So as soon as the sun starts coming out and the flowers start blooming, it just feels like we have went from Narnia, land of winter, to the king is returning in our spirit.
That's just some great C.S. Lewis language that you have there. Way to go. Come on. Well, let's jump into this. We've been talking about culture and how culture is made up of whatever you are building, whatever you're encouraging in the organization, plus whatever you allow in. And the next big idea that we want to cover is that how do we create culture and contribute to culture as we build bridges from where we are to where we want to be.
Right.
Talk to us about that. What does that look like?
Yeah. I think a lot of times we get excited about something and we're like, this is what we want to do. And we forget to just do a diagnostic about where we are so that we can lay out an accurate roadmap to get there. So then we start moving forward, and pretty soon we start feeling discouraged because it's harder than we thought. Or feeling like, maybe it's moving in a wrong direction or whatever it is. And it's because we just didn't do the work to go like, where are we right now and why are we there? So that's the first thing that I think we should do, is just stop and go like, what is our current culture? Let's name it. Let's talk about why it is. Maybe it's like going back and revisiting the history of your culture on your team. And, maybe you had a person on your team who walked through like a diagnosis, or you lost people on your team, and it just affects the overall team spirit. Everyone feels it, and it's not always like it's just life. So it's not always like, well, someone did something wrong. Sometimes it's just like things were hard and it's difficult. So let's just name it and let's say like, here's where we're at right now, is that we're all coming in and we're dragging our feet and we are going through the motions, but we're not like excited. We don't love it. We're not like burning with passion. And so we have to do the diagnosis of going like, where are we for real? Name it, talk about even some of the contributing factors so that you can lay out a roadmap.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that one of the cultures that we value so much that we talked about last episode in part 1 was a culture of choosing joy.
Yeah.
And one of the things I know that you and I love to do is explore the tensions in scripture.
Yeah.
We a lot of times talk about the ditches on either side. If you go too far to the right, you fall in a ditch. Too far in the left, you fall in a ditch. Jesus has called us to walk the narrow way. But one that would be worth exploring around the whole culture of joy and an attitude of joy was a ditch on one side that feels like overly optimistic, overly joyful, even to the degree of being fake.
Yes.
And I know we've spent time with people where it just seems like their joy is this even real? Are you being authentic and honest with what's really going on in your life? But then there's the ditch on the other side where people are just being toxic, negative, apathetic, grumpy, ugh. So talk to us about how that plays in with this whole idea of building the bridge from where you are to where you want to be.
Right. We use this language all the time. I can't remember. I think it was back when we were in our 20s, maybe. I can remember me and you going to some kind of leadership training and them presenting this thought to us about the ditches on either side of the road, being able to name them so that you can steer clear of them. And I remember it blowing our minds. We were just like, wow, nobody ever helped us understand that that's what's going on. Because natural tendency for us as humans is we experience something, and so then we react to it by swinging to exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
So if you have been a part of one extreme, then you jump to the opposite extreme, and you don't like naturally go to the middle. Like, here's what's balanced and healthy and good.
This is what we're seeing so much in the deconstruction movement.
Yeah,
They have
exactly.
one offense and swing all the way to
Yes.
tear it all apart, tear down.
Yeah. So we always are just looking and going like, let's just name it. What's the ditch? Because we don't want to live there. We don't want to be in the ditches. And unless we like talk about them and talk about the way that we get pulled into them, then we don't know how to walk in the middle. And you're right, like especially when it comes to, let's say, attitude and what you're bringing up, joy, is for us, we value authenticity.
Yes.
It's one of the things that makes us who we are. I think when people come into Sun City Church, it's been a word that people have used a lot. You guys feel authentic. You're not afraid to talk about your own weaknesses, your own struggles. Your team just feels like real to us. And we want to hold on to that.
Absolutely.
We don't want to not be that. So we don't want to be like so fake that we're unwilling to say like, I am under the weather and just sick today. And so I feel bad, you know, or I'm walking through something and this is hard and it's painful. We just want people to like feel like they can come in and go like, yeah, you get me. You live life the same way, put on your pants one leg at a time, kind of thing. And so you got to name it and go like, let's not be fake, but let's also look at like, the ditch of allowing whatever you're walking through to just be the overshadowing thing in your world, and then everyone else is affected.
Yeah, then you're just authentically grumpy.
Yeah, exactly.
And nobody likes it.
Exactly. So I think whatever you're facing in your team is you're just going like, here's the diagnostic of where we are. Let's like diagnose it and go like, hey, here's the overall culture of our team. Maybe it's that we're not very good at honoring each other with our time. So in general, our team has just got kind of lazy when it comes to like showing up on time and doing our work like we said that we would. And so more and more team members are like kind of coming late and the meeting never starts on time. And, everyone said like, we're going to do this by next week. Nobody's done it by next week. So we've got like a culture here of laziness. Let's name like the ditches on both sides of the road when it comes to faithfulness and accountability.
Yeah.
And here's the like danger is we, become like crazy workaholics who something's going on. We just like work is the priority. We're going to make the deadline. We're going to make sure it happens no matter what. And on the other side, like we can't be trusted. Like no one believes us when we say we're going to do something. So what's the middle of the road? Like, take ownership of what you said that you're going to do. And then if you have something come up, I think you're the one that says this all the time. You're always saying like, make sure you pass the ball.
Yeah.
Like that's your analogy, like a basketball analogy, right?
Yeah. I always say this phrase, you got to shoot the ball or pass the ball, but don't turn the ball over.
Yeah.
So like, example would be, if you're coming down to Sunday morning, maybe it's Saturday night, 6 p.m., and you feel like, man, I'm really getting sick. The dream team's going to count on me tomorrow to show up because I confirmed on Planning Center like someone who loves Jesus. I confirmed on Planning Center. My check is green, and so they're counting on me.
Yeah.
And but I can feel it. I'm getting sick. I need to, for my health, sleep in. I'm not going to be able to make it. Well, shooting the ball would be showing up and serving anyway. Passing the ball would be like, hey, team leader, can't make it. I got to throw the ball to you. Turning over the ball would be not tell anyone and don't show up and just let it crash. So with our teams all the time, we're always saying, hey, shoot the ball or pass the ball, but don't just hold it and turn it over and melt down because you didn't talk to anybody.
Yeah. Yep. So it's so good that we just like, can identify some of the things that would be ditches. Can you think of other ones that like have been a big deal for us? Like as we continue just working on the culture. Culture is never something where you're like, I did that, finished, checklist, now it's done. So we're always working on it, but some of the big ditches for us that we've had to identify?
I mean, I think the one that we're exploring is awesome. Another big idea I know that we've been talking about is the tension between being led by leaders or leading yourself. Like leaders, before you're really going to be effective in taking on lots of feedback and coaching and next level responsibility, it's got to be something where you go, okay, I'm going to first lead myself, have a vision for my own life, my ministry, take some initiative, lead strong here first before I even try to get to the other side of getting all the coaching.
Yeah. And don't you think, like, on, when we're talking about the ditch of that, I think, at least speaking from my own experience, sometimes I drift towards, when it comes to that, like, leaning into other people's leadership, is I just don't want to get it wrong. So I kind of want to, like, let whoever else, obviously in this season of our life, we're the lead pastors, so there's not, other people that are, passing things down to us. But in other seasons of my life, when somebody else was the lead over me, I would want them to just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Because, like, I just didn't want to get it wrong.
Yeah.
I wanted to impress them. I
Yeah.
wanted to please them.
Yeah.
I really want to be a good team player.
Yep.
So I think the ditch of kind of falling into this place of, like, I'm just letting you lead me. And so I'm not, like, taking initiative.
Yeah.
I'm not, like, stepping up to the plate and really leading myself is one of the things I would have fallen into.
Yeah, definitely one of the ways to slow down the progress of the kingdom is to get behind, one leader or two leaders and wait for them to have all the initiative, take all the risks, have all the ideas. This is like the battleship mentality that we talked about years ago. And our big challenge to the congregation at that time was, we're not a battleship, we're an aircraft carrier.
Right.
I mean, every single one of us on the team, we're all pilots. We're all taking the war out to the front lines where the enemy is, at our workplace, and our neighborhoods, and our homes, and our families, and ministry, and everything, the platform God's given us. And
what was that sermon series, by the way?
3 ships.
3 ships.
Remember?
So if anybody wants to go back and listen
go
to it.
check it out in the archives. But yeah, we're not a cruise ship. We're not a battleship. And the battleship was all about, we just get behind the, just the vision of the lead pastors. But the aircraft carrier means the church exists to fuel you up and send you out as a pilot of your plane that's taking the war to the enemy. And, there's still coordination that goes on with an aircraft carrier, but you gotta have a sense of your own mission, your own target.
Yes.
What are you shooting for?
Right.
So that was a big deal for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're going to build a bridge to where we are, to where we need to be, we got to, like, diagnose it. We got to, name the ditches. But then, like, I think, it always has to start with the leader.
Yeah.
It has to start with individually people just going, like, I am going to, like you're saying, lead myself. So sure, there's someone that is, like, over me, but I'm just going to take responsibility. I'm the one that's responsible for the way that I show up and the work that I do. And overall, when I stand before Jesus someday and say, like, here's what I did in the hours that I lived on the earth, this is my life, and we hold it out before him. Like, when it comes to leading yourself, like, what would you say is the biggest thing you would tell, like, maybe to, like, young leaders or people that just need to grow in that place? Like, what have you learned about leading yourself?
Oh gosh, that's like a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
We could go a long ways with
Yeah.
that. I think maybe most important, I don't know, maybe not most important. First thing that comes to my mind is that the word disciple comes from the same root word as the word discipline. The disciple is the disciplined one. When it comes to leading yourself, there is just a choice. I'm going to be a disciplined leader.
Yeah.
I'm going to be disciplined with my calendar. I'm going to be disciplined with my time. Be disciplined with my energy. Be disciplined with my communication.
Yeah.
There's so much there in terms of leading yourself. It's showing up with attitude. It's really embracing and taking responsibility for every one of these cultures.
Yeah.
So it's not someone else's job to inspire me to love God. I'm going to lead myself to love God. It's not someone else's job to tell me to love people. Like, I'm going to, out of love for Jesus and out of love for others, prioritize that value and self-correct if I can feel myself getting grumpy or getting tired or not wanting to be around people. Hey, that's not what this is about. If I don't want to love people, I got to get out of ministry, because ministry is about people.
Yes.
If I'm finding myself wandering in my vision and my love for the house or my pursuit of excellence or my joyful attitude, I need some practices that will make sure and get me moving. And I know we mentioned a few practices as we did this with our staff.
Yeah. Yep.
Tell us about some practices about how do we get moving if we're kind of in the ditch of grumpiness.
Yeah. Well, I would just say, even before we talk about these practices, is I can remember a time in my life, I tend to be more creative in, my personality. And I used to have this idea that the more structured I was with my schedule and my life, that the less creative I would be. Like, I really loved spontaneity. I just wanted to feel it, So I didn't like the idea of like every day I get up and I read the same Bible reading plan, or I have my schedule and this is what I do in every one of these blocks of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a revelation to me that my creativity actually went to new levels the more structured that I got.
Wow.
I thought that they were in opposition to each other.
Yeah.
And just what you're talking about, like discipline is what a disciple is. What I discovered is the more that I brought in the riverbanks on my life and like, okay, I have a plan and I'm executing the plan, is that it allowed my creativity to breathe. And I just had this like wrong idea that it was going to stifle my creativity.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to be able to just like, come up with the new flow the way that I just want the day to go and just be able to choose. So that was really important for me. But some of the things, just the practices of leading yourself, I think come back to just basic core discipleship, like prayer. Like, how do you pray? When do you pray? What does that look like inside of your world? And, for me personally, I just pray through the Lord's Prayer every single day. And sure, there's other prayer on top of that, but it's just so in me at this point that I wake up and a lot of times it's just the very first thing that just begins coming out of my mouth as I just begin praying through every part of the Lord's Prayer. And it's that pathway for me, that path to his presence. When the day's difficult, when it's painful, when something's going on in it, it's just the way that I get into that place with God, of I'm connecting with him and I'm receiving the grace that I need in order to live out the day. I think, another one would just be like, bringing people into your life, like the discipline, like, so relationships don't feel like they maybe fit inside of that, but I think I've discovered that it really does need to be an investment into relationships, that when you are struggling or going through a difficult season, you just have someone that's going to set you straight or help you see right.
This would be one of the big reasons why I think everyone needs to make a life commitment to small groups. You got to have a disciplined choice of I am carving out the time in my calendar as a lifestyle forever.
Yes.
Not like sometimes and drift for a while and life got busy. Because before you know it, you're in the moment where you need someone to tell you the truth, who knows you and will call you out.
Right. Yes.
And now all of a sudden you're out of the rhythm and it's hard to create it. And when you have it, it actually becomes such an important thing, but it doesn't always feel important all the time.
No. Yep.
But it's in the moment that you need it. And it is so important that you wish you had done the work over years of carving it out.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, it is a discipline.
I'm just all of a sudden remembering, do you remember that book that they have for kids, The Little Red Hen?
Yeah, vaguely.
It's like this whole story is long. Well, it felt long when I was little. About just like this hen that decides she's going to bake bread and goes to all the other barnyard animals to try to go like, come help me make bread. And then it goes through the process of like picking the grain, grinding the grain, like making the dough, letting it rise, and just the like long process of making bread. And all the other barnyard animals were like, nope, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
That's not what I want to do. And then it gets to the end of the book and the bread is there and everyone shows back up as soon as they smell the aroma and they all want to eat the bread.
Yeah.
Just nobody wanted to make the bread.
Yeah.
And I just think about that when it comes to relationships. It's hard to like invest. It's a discipline. It does have to be a discipline. Like I even think about us in small groups. Like we do small groups in our life just as like, this is not Danny and Jamie as lead pastors, Danny and Jamie as followers of Jesus.
Yeah.
We need people in our world.
This is what Christians do.
Yeah, exactly. And I like, man, sometimes we're so busy that I'm like, what are we doing with our life? Our house is a mess. People are coming over on Tuesday night. I just can't even like, find the time to get the groceries or, do whatever. But just forcing myself into the rhythms, I can't think of a small group semester where I haven't got to the end and went like, that was so fun. Like maybe there's been one, but most of the time I'm like in the middle of it, like this is tiring and exhausting and it's hard to make it happen. And then at the end, it's like the little red hen with the bread. I'm so glad
So glad I got to eat this bread.
Exactly. Yeah.
I do think that most people could identify with that feeling. Maybe especially if you're older or have already been into parenting or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like the older I got, the more true this got. But the front side of like getting ready to go be around people, I think when I was young, I was just excited to be around people no matter what. And then the older that I got, the more introverted that I became. Yeah. And the more I had to stir myself up toward it. But you're right, at the end of it, there's almost always, I mean, every once in a while you have like an awkward night or something.
Sure,
something
it's not like a formula.
Like,
yeah.
Most of the time by the end, you're like, I'm so glad I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just meet people. And I think it comes out of a place too where you're just looking for where God is moving and bringing what you need. I think I shifted at some point in my life from looking at my life through this lens of I'm waiting for God to bring what I need to it's already here. I just have to see it.
Yep.
And like, I don't know how it all unfolds, but God's already moving. And I think about the first lines of the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I'm not going to want. So I'm not going to be the victim that like, I don't have enough. I don't have what I need. I'm just like training my eyes, always moving. So my job is just to see it. So when I bring the small group in, I'm like, you know, if I'm discouraged right now, if I'm tired right now, there's probably exactly what I need here in this room. I just don't know the way that it's going to like come to the surface. So I'm just looking for it and waiting for it. And it just then puts it in a spot where I'm not like every time it has to be, you know, the best small group experience or the best conversation with a mentor or something like that. It's just like daily bread. It's just exactly what we needed if we're just training our eyes to look for it.
That's so good.
So it's just those personal disciplines. I think, you know, we could, you know, go deep on this of practically when you're just like as a leader not feeling it, just what is the practical things you do? Change up the scenery, like, you know, get out of your normal space and get a new perspective on what's going on in your world. Do what you need to do to stir up that motivation. And all of us are different on what like stirs that up. And I think self-awareness for us is really big on how to lead yourself.
Yeah. I know for you, if we put in the effort, spend the money, and get out of town, and we're no longer in our house where, you know, there's all the responsibilities of cleaning and order and what should be, and we just get you out into the mountains or in the woods or at the lake or anywhere that's not our home.
Yeah.
That's where you almost every time, like it's similar to small group and similar to church. At the front end, there's this temptation of, it's like not deal with it. It's so much work.
Yeah.
Then when we're out there, you're like, oh, this is so good. I'm so glad we're doing this.
Yeah.
So the change of scenery is huge for you.
Absolutely.
I know for me, I circle back a lot to a discipline of praise. I just recently created a new Spotify playlist for myself called The High Praises.
Ooh.
And I'm just playing it more because I'm just trying to fight off any spirit of heaviness.
Yeah.
And God promises that he gives us the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. So I want to make sure I have those at my fingertips. And most of the worship albums or whatever are mostly slow, thoughtful worship songs that are intimate or whatever. And I just need songs that are like upbeat, excited, happy, high praises of God in my mouth. And when I put that on loud in my car and just go for it as I'm driving to work or driving to a meeting or something, it makes a huge difference to get me moving. It's hard to stay frustrated when you're telling God how great he is.
That's so true. Do you find too, I find this for my life, I'd be curious what you would say. I find like physical posture and even volume sometimes will just be the thing. Like if I'm feeling it, like I'm just feeling this heaviness and discouragement, sometimes I'll just like get to a place where I can pray by shouting. And it's just like, I don't know what it is, but it just like affects things at the top of my lungs, just like praying or lifting my hands. Like I always want to like really get into our church. You know, you're always trying to draw people in and everyone has their own personalities as far as like how they worship. But I want like our church to understand just what happens when you just whole body into worship, raise your hands, get it, bounce on your toes a little bit, like get into it because something just unlocks inside of you as you're just in that space. Do you find that?
Yeah. I mean, this would probably be one of the most life-changing things for me when I was first coming to know Jesus. I tell that story a lot, but I feel like the main posture for how to relate with God when I was growing up was bow your heads, close your eyes.
Yeah.
Fold your hands. So everything has like
quiet. Yes.
Inward. And then I came into an encounter with people that were lifting hands, lifting head, lifting voice. Everything went from like quiet and subdued to loud and expressive. And the difference that outer expression made on what was going on inside was literally night and day.
Yeah.
It went from like, I don't know, distracted and wandering and selfish to like laser focused and waking up my heart in fire. Like it was so different. And I'm so thankful that I realized like most of the posture and expression in the book of Psalms and in the Bible is like that.
It's exuberant.
Yeah.
Yes.
Big deal.
Yeah. Yep. I love that.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
So we talked about how you build a bridge from where you are to where you need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, we're just big picture here is how do I create and contribute to culture? Here's your next big idea that you gave us was don't let yourself off the hook.
Yeah.
If I want to contribute and create culture for my church as a member of the dream team, I got to not let myself off the hook. Tell us what that means.
Yeah. This whole idea is, we've been talking about leading yourself, but here's, I think, the temptation for the leader is to just give yourself the excuse out. Like, my schedule is different. My life, I have so much more going on. And there's just a temptation for all of us to justify ourselves. So, if we're not feeling it and we're like, well, I'm under the weather today, or I have this like thing going on and we just let ourselves off the hook. My job is
so hard.
Yeah.
My
whatever
marriage,
it is.
my kids.
And we all can find it.
Yeah.
And I think when we broaden it out, when we're looking at just our own lives, man, we are so tempted to do it. We're just, all of us, look at our own lives. When we broaden out and go like, all of us are tempted to do it, then I think it just helps us to hold ourselves accountable. Like thinking back clear to the very beginning, how the whole story of humanity started is like as soon as the fall takes place, they start blaming each other. Eve is like blaming the serpent, Adam's blaming Eve. Everyone's like, this is not really my fault. And, to just be able to go like, this is me. I'm the problem. It's me.
That's a great, you should write a song. That's a great idea. Inspired.
Culture just falls apart when the leader refuses to be held accountable.
Yeah.
And I think, for the big C church, we've looked at a lot of leaders that had big platforms that were preaching a message they weren't living. And they were not letting themselves be held accountable. And so it's a conversation me and you are having all the time. How do we just make sure that we do not let ourselves do that?
Yeah.
And I always thought like when I was a young leader that wouldn't be a problem. Like I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And then like the more that I grow in leadership and you live in a different world where you have a lot of stuff going on all the time. The temptation is real.
Yep.
It is there to just like, the rules don't apply.
Yeah.
And when it comes to culture or anything, we're talking about in morality, the way that the accountability starts with me and I hold myself to the highest standard.
It's interesting because I think being honest and owning our weaknesses and our shortcomings and our problems, it's a little counterintuitive. Human nature, as you brought up with Adam and Eve, is to hide and to blame shift and to go, it's not me, and to be defensive. But the reality is when we own it and we don't let ourselves off the hook and we go, no, actually, this is my problem
Yep.
I'm the issue. It immediately puts us in control over the issue.
Yes.
Like if it's my problem, I can fix it. If it's somebody else's problem,
you can't do anything about
I'm
it.
stuck with it. And now I'm the victim and I'm being victimized and I'm stuck in this place. And
Right.
usually when there's a problem, you don't like being there anyway. So the sooner that you go, like I got to change it.
Yes.
I'm responsible. Now I'm in a place of power instead of a place of weakness,
Yeah.
which is so counterintuitive
Yes.
because we think our problems are our weaknesses, but actually as soon as we name them, they become a place of power. And leaders know that.
Yeah.
So like one of the most empowering, exciting conversations that I get to have is when a staff member brings the problem to me that they know they caused or they're responsible for. And they go, I did this. I messed up. I failed. Would you help me not fail in the future? What are your great ideas? That is always an exciting conversation.
Right.
I hate the conversations where I have to go chase them down and say, hey, did you know that this is a problem? I don't know if you've thought about this. That is not the conversation I love to have. But again, that's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
That's backwards from human nature. When we know there's a problem, we tend to try to hide it and hope no one sees us. And we fall prey to this big lie, like no one's going to see that I'm letting this fall apart. And I would say even at the dream team level, this applies across all of our teams big time.
Yeah. And I would even like say right now in culture, there's such a big tendency towards the victim mindset. And again, you can look at the ditches on both sides, right? Because the ditch on the other side is like there's real stuff that is unjust that is taking place, and people are not naming it.
Yep.
So, I mean, if we look at the Me Too movement, right, where everyone's like jumping on with like stuff has been happening that has been swept under the rug. This has to be named. So that's a ditch on the other side of the road. But you go to the reaction, and the reaction is everyone else is making my life horrible, and this is everyone else's problem, and I don't need to be held accountable for anything. I don't have any responsibility in it. And coming back to the like, hey, where's the middle ground where like we're not going to ignore things that are wrong, but we also are going to take ownership for it. And even as parents, trying to teach our kids this, because kids, I think you can see this played out so much more even in kids. They come from a place where they don't have any of the power. They're like little, and all the adults have the power and just control their lives. And then, now we have teenagers, and they're gaining more and more control. And we have to constantly work with them to understand you actually have the power to change things. So you feel like you don't have friends right now. Go change that.
Yes.
Go find some friends, right? Like your teacher, you don't feel like is being very fair. Go have a conversation with them and talk to them about it. And if they won't listen, go talk to someone else about it. Like I'm just constantly trying to push my kids. You have more power than you think you do.
Yes.
And you've grown, like it's understandable. You like when you were little, you didn't have that power, but you do now. So like I'll tell our daughter sometimes, she'll tell me about like, somebody like a teacher or a coach just saying something to some of the girls that feels like just slightly inappropriate, like maybe it's not enough that you would go call them out on it and get them into like major trouble, but that doesn't need to be said. And I said, just loudly say that feels inappropriate. You have power. You have more power than you think. You don't have to ignore it. You don't have to like go and like get someone fired, but loudly stand up and say like, that feels inappropriate. Like, I think it's important to name where we're at in culture, that we've probably come from on a like big culture level right now in the world from a place in the church where a lot of stuff, was going on that, people weren't naming, things weren't brought to the light, and now we've swung in the opposite direction. And there's a pretty big victim mentality. Do you notice that?
Yeah. I mean, I think we see it on both sides. So I really appreciate you bringing back the ditch analogy to talk about it, because obviously the church has been complicit in lots of terrible abuse, and with kids and women and all kinds of places where the church has needed, again, Big C Church has needed to own their own sin. But especially as you're talking about it with our kids, I know what it is to take responsibility, lift your voice. In fact, I remember learning that one of the biggest deterrents of sexual harassment or sexual abuse is women learning just to be confident to be loud about it in a moment.
Yep, just to
say
yell.
something, stand up, yell. And it's the silence that actually continues to allow the enemy to attack, which actually has great application not only for women in those kind of situations, but it's probably true of all of our spiritual life.
Yep.
The more that we succumb in silence to the plan of the enemy, the more that we become the victim to him. Flip side of the coin, the more that we learn to lift our voice, speak truth, say what's real, name what is, lift up our praise, all that stuff, the lifting of your voice has power.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big deal.
That's so good.
Yep. Okay, so here's the last one. We'll wrap up with this one today. How do I create and contribute to healthy team culture? I don't sabotage myself.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, this is where you just begin to recognize the things that are going to sabotage what you're trying to build. So you got to take accountability. You got to name where you're going. You got to be intentional about creating it. But then so important that you just name hey, here's the things that if you do not step in and address this, it is going to blow up in your face.
Yeah. And you listed off a bunch of these for us as you were teaching it to our staff. Let's just go down that road a little bit. What are some things that sabotage our own leadership and sabotage the culture?
Yep. So here's one is just venting / complaining. Ooh. So I think this is another one we give ourselves permission to we justify somehow. But if I'm complaining versus using my words to actually solve problems you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
If I hear that in the team, if I'm doing that as the leader, that's going to sabotage the culture.
Yeah.
Especially if the leader's doing it, it's going to just get reproduced in the whole team. So it's recognizing it. And it's hard to do it. We were having a meeting with our team just not very long ago. And we said this, all ideas are good ideas in this moment, right? So nobody gets to just naysay an idea. All the ideas are good. They're going on the board.
Yes.
And so we made that rule. And then it immediately, somebody goes I think we should do this. And another person goes no, here's why we can't. And we're nope, stop, silent. And then I said that one moment, 30 seconds later, I caught myself doing it. And I was stop. So it's not that, none of us do it. And I think if we try to pretend oh, this is what, other people do, and we don't, all of us can do this. We got to just have hold ourselves accountable, no venting and complaining. We're going to be those who use our words to build instead of tear down.
That's so good. I know one of the things that people always struggle with when we talk about this is, well, how do I know if I'm crazy or not? If I see something bad or I see something that should change and I'm not supposed to complain about it, does that mean I just leave it bad, leave it unsaid?
Yeah.
And I know one of the cultures that has so helped me is that I have to discern who's the right person to talk to about it. And the right person is always the person who can do something about it.
Yes, right.
Which is normally up the chain of command of authority. So if I talk to my leader, my coordinator, the director, then usually they have the power to do something about it. If I talk to the teammate or the person I'm serving, talk to the kid in kids ministry or talk to the, another small group member, whatever, usually that person doesn't have power to change what I'm struggling with. And that's where it's really tearing down culture with venting and complaining.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reason we don't do that, right, is we're intimidated. We don't want the person above us to think poorly of us. So then, there's this tendency, let's go double check, see if I'm seeing it right.
Make sure I'm seeing it right.
Yeah, but how often that just become the excuse?
Absolutely.
We never bring it to the leader. We just create the culture of murmuring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, we're intimidated and we're afraid that having an honest conversation with somebody above us, or maybe even at a peer level, is going to cost us in that relationship, when most of the time it actually doesn't.
Yeah, and if it does, maybe you've had a bad experience with that, and you've had a leader that was unhealthy and just could not, take any kind of criticism or feedback. that should be, if that's happening over and over again, of course, like we're all human, but that should be a sign of like, this might be like overall, there's something that's not good in the culture, right? So not to say that that never happens, but you're right. In a healthy culture, you should be able to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
And if you can't, like pulling in somebody else above them actually helps and serves the whole organization.
Yeah, totally. That's so good. Let's go through a couple more of
Okay,
these.
yeah.
So how does making assumptions, this would be the next one, making assumptions, how does that sabotage yourself?
Yeah, making assumptions. I think this is a fascinating one because we all do this as well. Our brains are wired for stories. This is one of my big things. I love storytelling. So we're always like filling in the things that we don't know with just what we imagine is the case. And so we assume other people, like you pass someone in the hall and they don't look at you and you're like, how come they didn't make eye contact?
Because they hate you.
Yeah. And you assume something, you make up the story and you fill in the blank. And it's really funny as a leader to have this happen all the time, as somebody comes up and says like, is the reason you either said that or didn't say that because of this? And I was like, no, not at all.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, exactly. But we all do it. And I think, coming to a place of going like, I'm just not going to fill in the story with what I don't know. I'm just going to hold any assumption very loosely. And if I, need to go and ask someone and go like, hey, what's going on in this situation? I'm going to go investigate instead of go and like say, here's what I think is happening. And especially not like spread it. So as soon as you hear people making assumptions, spreading things that just aren't true, man, that's going to sabotage the culture.
Yeah. How about this one? I'll merge a couple of these as we're running out of time. How about stuffing or ignoring things or settling into isolation?
Yeah.
Those would be like similar ideas, but also distinct. How is that self-sabotaging?
This is the thing. I hear people say this all the time. I'm going to deal with it myself. And I just think, no, you're not. I don't think you are. Because most of the time when I hear people say that, I hear them say like, it's just not that big of a deal. And they're sweeping it under the rug. And I always think a volcano is brewing.
Yep.
And that volcano one day is going to explode. So like, I just think we need to have clean, pure hearts before God and before each other, where if there's something there, just go have the conversation.
Come on.
I imagine this is the way that I envision my inner state of being, like my spirit, my soul, is I just envision like a sanctuary. Like if you walk into like a big, beautiful sanctuary and fills you with awe and it just feels serene and it just feels like, wow, the stillness, God is here in this place. And I want that to be the inner state of who I am, living out of that place. And so if there's something there between me and God, I want to like deal with it because it just robs that whole state of being.
Yes.
If there's something there between somebody else where I'm like, I heard this person's offended, like just go ask, go deal with it. Don't imagine that you can just like ignore it and it'll go away, because I've just watched it over and over and over again. Like this is one of my like pet peeves now is people go like, I'm just dealing with it myself. And I just think like this is a problem then that we're saving for tomorrow and we're going to let it get bigger till tomorrow. So I tell our kids this all the time, like healthy things grow in the light, ugly things just get bigger in the dark. I think about, the little monster that, is always in the stories that somebody decides is going to be their pet and thinks it's going to stay little. And then it just like turns into the like huge, horrible thing that's
Like
going to eat them in their
Stanley
sleep.
from the Little Shop of Horrors. Did you ever watch that musical? No. With the man-eating plant? You got to watch it. Now we have one for our movie list.
Nice.
You love
Excellent. I think that's the same kind of thing is, if there's an offense, if there's some kind of hurt feeling, something that you're just like, man, it's just in your heart, is go just have the conversation. It feels intimidating, feels like, man, I don't really want to even have to do this. It feels easier in the moment to ignore it.
Yeah.
But if you just do the work, you get your heart back to that place where it is that sanctuary of just like things feel at peace, things feel good.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, Dream Team, thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video and participate in what we're doing now for leadership development on the other side of our regular team night rotation. And I just want you to know, man, we care so much about healthy team culture.
Yeah.
We have been a part of unhealthy cultures and healthy cultures and everything in between. And we're so passionate about maintaining a culture that everyone loves to be in. It's fun to be around. It feels clean and nice and just like the Lord loves to be there. And so it's something that we're passionate about and trying with everything inside of us to build and maintain and keep, protect. But also we know that every single member of the Dream Team are creators and contributors. So it's going to be a super fun summer. Got a lot of stuff coming up with camp and Serve Day and wonderful things coming down the pipe, and can't wait to be a part of creating and maintaining healthy culture going forward.
Yeah.
So bless you guys. We love you. Talk soon.